All right, I wanted to make this video real quickly for the Torah observant community who maybe have not done enough research into who the true Jews really are, who the true Israelites really are, and just how much historical proof there really is. And I say this because if you are not of a certain background, you may have not had the desire or the energy to really dive deep into the history on these things. So I wanted to read a few screenshots. We can sort of connect the dots. And these are just some of hundreds and hundreds of screenshots that I've collected over the past 8 months. So we're going to start here. The present Christians in Africa are partly strangers and partly natives, some of them slaves to the Turks and barbarians, and others free. Some of the Jews who inhabit both sides of the Niger derive themselves from Abraham. Others fled hither from Asia when Vespasian destroyed Jerusalem, or from Judea when 'twas wasted by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians. All right, here's another source here. There are some Jews still lingering in the valleys of the Jordan, having been oppressed by the successive conquerors of Syria for ages. Conquerors of Syria for ages. A low race of people, and described by trustworthy travelers as being as black as any of the Ethiopian races. Now, let's get into these Cochin Jews. They're also known as Malabar Jews, or Cochinim from Hebrew, Yehudi Cochin. They are one of the oldest groups of Jews in India with roots that are claimed to date back to the time of King Solomon. The Cochin Jews settled in the kingdom of Cochin in South India. Okay, the traveler Benjamin of Tudela, speaking of Kolam on the Malabar coast, writes in his itinerary, throughout the island includes all the towns thereof live several thousand Israelites. The inhabitants are all black, and the Jews also. The latter are good and benevolent. They know the law of Moses and the prophets, and to a small extent the Talmud and Halakha. Here's another source. Yehudi, a place of great trade. This place is reported to be inhabited by one of the lost tribes of Israel, possibly an emigration from the tribe of Judah. Yehuda in African Arabic signifies Judah. Yehudi signifies Jew. It is not impossible that many of the lost tribes of Israel may be found dispersed in the interior regions of Africa. When we shall become better acquainted with that continent, it is certain that some of the nations that possessed the country eastward of Palestine when the Israelites were a favored nation have emigrated to Africa. It goes on to talk about the Amorites who are in the Atlas Mountains, which is near Morocco. Now, let's get into this one here. It says, who retain their religious rights and the distinct habits which keep them isolated from the other nations. Though thus separate from the African population, they are black and resemble the other Negroes in every respect as to physical character. It is probably in allusion to the case that Pennington in his textbook says, the descendants of a colony of Jews, originally from Judea, settled on the coast of Africa, are black. Now, in the 16th century, the Portuguese arrived in parts of Africa and Asia and later used watercolor drawings to draw the people that they saw. Now, the Malabar Jews, who we talked about earlier, were drawn by the Portuguese in watercolor. When we zoom in, we can see curly hair, black skin, right? These are the so-called descendants of the era of King Solomon. Now, another thing to understand about the disciples leaving to find the lost tribes of Israel. the St. Thomas Christians, also called Syrian Christians of India, or all these names here. I highlighted the word Nazrani because, as we see in the Bible, Paul was called the leader of the sect of Nazarenes. Okay, it says Thomas the Apostle in the first century is where the origins of these St. Thomas Christians come from. Okay, these people were in the Malabar coast. Now, these people were also drawn by the Portuguese. As you can see here, they're also black.